Hey, so I'm about ready to start the timing phase of this project, and I'm going to start with the cam adjuster here on the rear of the cylinder head. And there's a few things that you need to worry about when you are timing your engine. And one of those things is ensuring that your cam chain adjuster is timed perfectly. So let's take a look at some of the things that you need to consider. All right, so I have the cam adjuster here, along with a new poly drive bolt, which is important. And if you take a look at the back of this sprocket, you'll see a line there. And that line coincides with the engine being in time. So when you purchase a replacement chain, the trick is to do a little bit of counting here. And you'll notice that this chain here already has a marked link. Is to count out 19 of these pins and then tag 19 and 18 with some paint or a Sharpie or something, and that is what lines up with your adjuster. So if we count this out, let me use this bolt here. You'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. So I colored those two. And then what you do is you take your chain and you lay it on top of your adjuster, and then you put that pin directly on top of that. And then I'm doing this with one hand, so it's kind of slippery, but that's what you do. And then you lay it in, and I'll show you the rest when I put this camera on the tripod. Okay, so I'm going to put the cam chain tensioner on there. First, I need to put a little thread locker to start these off. Okay, so I had the wrong chain. I must have had the oil pump chain. So anyway, I did the same thing here, 18 around, and then mark 19 around and mark 18 and 19. And then line this up with the mark on your cam adjuster. There's a little mark there. And this is where it gets kind of tricky, and this is why I have the vice grip on the intake side. It's because I got to give it a little bit of a twist. There's just enough play on the camshaft to where it'll pull the chain in a little bit so I can get this notch here lined into that notch there. And then I'll just slip this over like that. And then that should do it. Now what I need to do is just turn this just enough to get this thing on. And there. And then use your Asimocker to tighten this up, torque it down, and release the tensioner here. And again, what you're looking for is the gold link to line up on the intake side, and then the markings that you set up here are basically just a shortcut so that you know exactly where to put the teeth on the cam adjuster. Just makes it easier to line it up. Oh man. Well, it wasn't recording. But it wasn't all that exciting, folks. There, time lapse. Boom. Bolts tightened. Now I gotta torque them down. No. Gosh, dog it. We are making really good progress here. I am on the intake side again. I have the replacement connector for the fuel injector that broke. And be sure to check out that video in the upper left-hand corner on a future Yogi's Tech Tip on how I did that, how I replaced these connectors. They're not cheap, like from the manufacturer or from the dealer. That's a $13 connector. I can probably get it for $8 or $9 on one of the online stores. But when you need something, you know, relatively right away these days, going to the dealer is the way to do it. So anyway, I had to remove the intake manifold because I had to get to this bolt right here, which attaches to this bracket, which connects to the engine cover. So I had to take it off. I needed to lift it up on this side anyway because I needed to ensure that the angle was proper here on these so that you don't need to remove the intake manifold to take off a connector on a fuel injector, I hope. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install the oil housing here. And these are all just going to be dry run fits, meaning I'm not going to torque them down just yet because I want to make sure all the wiring and the conduit and the coolant tubes are all properly fitted, and then I'll go in there and tighten it all up. So let's get it going. This here was a lessons learned. I can tell you, I learned this the hard way. It's important that you dry fit your parts and work your way from the bottom up. That was one of the main reasons why I had to take off the intake manifold, was because I didn't do that. I started from the top down and I ran into that connector problem, which cost me $13 to $14 for a new plastic connector. So doing it this way, working it from the bottom up, you'll notice that you won't run into problems with routing conduit or cables or any of the coolant tubing. As long as you do it in this particular order, you shouldn't have any trouble. Manifold going in. Okay, in hindsight here, this is pretty hilarious. I couldn't really figure out why it kept tilting down. I thought it may have been the brace that needed to be installed underneath the turbo. but I thought I had it figured out, and I flipped those brackets you see there at the bottom around, but I still couldn't figure it out. You can see that huge gap. Hey guys, it's present day. I believe it is April 5th. I wanted to apologize. I don't have any footage of me reinstalling the exhaust manifold properly. So I'm just going to go over it here and just discuss some of the important things about it, and then I'll integrate it into the part 2 video. But if you noticed before, these brackets were on not only upside down, but backwards as well. So you saw that I tried to do it one way, and then that didn't work, and then I tried it another way, and that still didn't do it. What it was, the exhaust manifold here was up at an angle, and there was a huge gap there, and I couldn't figure it out until I realized that I had these brackets on reversed. So that was a little bit of a challenge. But let me show you some of the other things that I managed to accomplish on this side. So besides it looking, I believe, factory fresh, the oil connectors, like that needs to be cleaned maybe a little bit better. The oil return lines, the oil cooling lines, all of this here needed to be reinstalled, obviously. I have the engine mount bracket installed, the ground ready to go, and then of course all the tubing that goes back into the valve cover. Then of course this bracket here, which I don't know what that is. I believe it's another ground. Yeah, so turbo is looking spiffy and clean. It is not an upgraded turbo. I'm not going to put the money into that. And you notice that the cooling line here has been reattached as well. Yeah, so that's what it took to get this whole thing back installed. I do believe I needed to take this off a couple of times, besides for the reason with the bracket was because I forgot this heat shield. It doesn't look like I needed to do anything with the heat shield, so maybe not. Anyway, so all of this is reinstalled. I didn't even capture the vacuum pump reinstall, but that's fine. As you can see, the wiring harnesses, kind of a spoiler there, but that's that. Okay, we've come to the next and hopefully final phase of this rebuild is the timing and wrapping up the top here. As you can see, and if you've been watching my other videos, you know that the intake is complete. The intake on this side, the exhaust, turbo, oil lines have all been secured. Now I was just waiting on the bolts, as everybody knows who's into this kind of stuff. Parts have been really difficult to get our hands on lately because of the pandemic, I'm assuming, as well as just, you know, the hobby itself has really taken off. And I say hobby meaning the automotive enthusiast hobby or rebuild or whatever, because everybody is, I guess, doing what I'm doing and entertaining themselves by keeping busy in the garage. And this is one of my many projects I hope to have here in Yogi's garage. So I'm going to tighten this guy up. This is 50 Newton meters plus 180 degree turn. I need to put the cam tool in place here to keep the intake and the exhaust cams in time as I'm torquing this thing down. I don't need to worry about the crank. It's not attached. So let's do that first. So here's my Schwaben brand, and it's been very good to me, unlike the other one. And it fits right here. And again, if your engine or your cylinder head is in time, this pops right in. It shouldn't be torqued or anything. If it is, then you need to get yourself a tool and get some vice grips or something to slightly adjust your cams to get them in time. And then now I'm going to lock these down because we're going to be putting some torque. I need to ensure this all stays put. All right, this is north. And I got to get it all the way down here. All right, I've already started the process. I don't have anything to hold this. The one I did have was a cheap Amazon purchase, and it is no longer with us. So I'm going to use the Schwaben tool. I did a little test to see if these cams these cams are going to move, and I was able to get to almost 90 without it moving. So I'm going to keep an eye on it and see if this swabbing tool will hold it. Yeah, hey. There. All right, 180. Sprockets in place. All right, now it's time to time. So before I put the tooth belt on the gear, on the crank sprocket, if you can take a look here, you'll see that the crank is not at top dead center. That's top dead center here. There's a little mark as well as some nail polish from my personal collection. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to crank the engine just enough to get the engine in time, and then I'm going to snake in the belt, loosen the tensioner, get the belt in place, and yeah, we'll have a timed engine. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is get the engine block back in time so that it's in time with the cylinder head. So let's go ahead and do that. Right there. Yep, that's it right there. There. Okay, we are now belted up. So now we tension it up until the notch and indicator are right there. Not quite done yet. So in order to ensure that the engine's in time, the repair manual says that we have to crank this engine over a couple of times to make sure that both the top and the bottom realign. I went ahead and removed the cam alignment tool to make sure that I don't have anything interfering with me rotating this setup. So this is the first time the cylinder head and the crank have been cranked or turned over since I took this engine out of Olaf. And what I'm hoping is that we're going to turn this thing twice and it will be in time. Let's do it. Okay, that's one time. We do it again, this should come all the way back around. And it said to not stop at the 45 degree. It should go all the way to there. Yeah! Woo! We're in time! So there you go, all buttoned up. Okay, I'm moving on to the next project, and that is to clean up the wiring harness. And this is the wiring harness for a 4-cylinder engine, and it looks pretty complicated. And trying to remember where everything goes is going to take a little challenge. Luckily, you know, obviously this is the starting line where it connects back to the car itself, and then a bunch of stuff goes underneath. But yeah, this stuff needs to be cleaned, especially around what hung out around behind the transmission, or behind the engine in front of the transmission. All that's grimy. I just want it, you know, to look like the rest of the engine here, which looks amazing. So I'm going to get to cleaning all of this. Yeah, I know, I'm a mess. I've been working all weekend to try to wrap this up. You know that feeling you get when you're nearing the end of your project and you just want to rush to get it done. A lot of times you gotta, you know, not rush, and especially with situations like Olaf here, where it would not be a good idea to rush the process. I've been taking my time cleaning it. As you can see, I cleaned the valve cover. I should have put new hardware on it, but it is what it is. I got new ignition coils, new spark plugs. Speaking of cleaning, now that the engine is nice and clean, the last thing I want to do is put the engine back in a dirty engine bay. So yeah, we got to take care of this next. It's pretty dirty there on the subframe. I'm going to come in here with pressure washer and hit all of this. I'll get some of this out of the way. Transmission, the bell housing itself is going to need to be cleaned. I mean, that's really dirty. And the frame here, cleaned up. I just, you know, I want it to look nice. I don't want, and by the way, the reason why I'm holding the hood up is because I got to replace that hood strut. It went out on me. So you can see the hydraulic fluid leaking. But yeah, I've got a battery tender. So Olaf's battery is good to go. Yeah, just want to clean this thing up. All along this lip, I want all of that cleaned up. It's pretty dirty there. So yeah, that'll be my next project. Also want to inspect some of the hoses. Make sure that they're in good shape. None of the cracking, especially on the heat exchanger here. I don't want to have to mess with that once the engine is back in. Okay, so yeah, now I'm gonna let it soak. And in the meantime, I'm gonna clean up some of the other parts. But it's a good rule of thumb to let Purple Power just sit there and do its job while you're cleaning other stuff. The engine bay looks good. Got a few little buildups here. I'll have to hit it with a wire brush or something to get that off. But what's interesting is the paint is coming off the car here on the fender on the inside. So I'm a little concerned, but it's coming right off. You see that? Yeah. So anyway, looking much cleaner. Got a few more things I want to do to it, and then I will wrap it up.